There is a bird sitting on a wire above your street right now that knows your face better than most of your neighbors do. Not because it likes you. Not because it fears you. Because somewhere in the last few years, decades of quiet, patient science on crow intelligence has been piling up into a picture that most people have never actually sat down and looked at all at once. And when you do look at it all at once, it stops feeling like a fun animal fact and starts feeling like something else entirely. This is not a story about artificial intelligence cracking a secret animal language. Nobody has done that, not yet, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling you fiction dressed up as a headline. This is something stranger, because it's real. It's the story of what scientists have actually proven in controlled experiments, published and repeated and picked apart by other researchers trying to find the flaw in it. And the flaw was never there. Crows remember your face. They tell other crows about you. And the record they keep can outlive the birds who started it. It began as a lot of uncomfortable science does, with someone getting curious in a way most people never bother to be. In 2006, a wildlife biologist named John Marsluff was working at the University of Washington, and he wanted to answer a question that sounds almost too simple to need an experiment. Do crows recognize individual human faces, or do they just react to humans in general the way they might react to weather? To find out, he and his team trapped a small number of wild crows on campus. While doing it, the researchers wore a specific rubber mask, an unusual, distinct human face that the crows had never seen associated with anything before. The crows were briefly caught, banded for tracking, and released completely unharmed. Nothing cruel happened to them. But something had happened to them. For weeks afterward, the team went about campus doing ordinary things, feeding birds, walking around, sitting on benches, but sometimes wearing that same trapping mask and sometimes wearing a different, neutral mask that had nothing to do with the trapping. The pattern that emerged was immediate and unmistakable. Every time someone wore the trapping mask, crows scolded them, followed them, dive-bombed them, screamed at them from rooftops. Every time someone wore the neutral mask, doing the exact same walk on the exact same path, nothing happened. The crows ignored them completely. That alone would have been a solid finding. A wild animal learning to associate a specific human face with a bad experience and holding on to that association is a nothing. But then Marsluff kept the study running. And running. Years passed. He came back to that same campus wearing that same trapping mask, long after the original handful of birds should have, by any reasonable expectation, forgotten the whole thing or simply died off and taken the memory with them. Instead, the mobbing continued. Not just from the original birds, but from crows that could not possibly have been there for the original trapping because they hadn't been born yet. That's the detail that turns this from a memory story into a communication story. A threat that only 7 crows personally witnessed had, over time, become common knowledge to dozens of birds, including ones hatched years later. Somehow, the information about a dangerous human face had moved from crow to crow, parent to offspring, flock to flock, without a repeat performance of the original event. The study ran for over a decade, and researchers found the hostility only began to fade as the original witnesses aged out of the population, suggesting the direct experience mattered more than the second-hand version. But the second-hand version was real enough to produce real attacks on people who had personally done nothing at all. Sit with that for a second, because it's easy to read past it. A person could walk onto that campus having never once interacted with a crow in their life, wearing the wrong face, and get mobbed by birds acting on a warning passed down socially rather than learned firsthand. That is not simple stimulus and response. That is closer to reputation. And once you accept that crows can build and pass along a reputation for a threat, you have to ask the uncomfortable follow-up question. What else are they building reputations for? That question is what pulled other researchers into crow behavior from angles that had nothing to do with danger at all. Kaylee Swift, a researcher who studied under Marsluff, turned her attention to something almost nobody had looked at closely: what crows do when one of their own dies. The behavior she documented is strange enough on its own that you don't need to embellish it. When a crow encounters a dead crow, other crows show up. Sometimes just a couple, sometimes large, noisy gatherings. They call loudly. They circle. In many cases, they go still and quiet in a way that reads, to any human watching, as something very close to grief. Swift wanted to know if that was actually what was happening or if something colder was going on underneath it. So she ran controlled experiments. Researchers would present a taxidermied crow, sometimes alongside a person standing nearby holding nothing threatening at all, just standing there. And the crows didn't just mourn. They investigated. They scolded loudly, gathered other crows to the scene, and in some experimental setups, began treating any human standing near a dead crow as a suspect, regardless of whether that person had anything to do with the death. In follow-up observations, crows that had witnessed a human near a dead crow later reacted to that same person with alarm calls and avoidance, sometimes for weeks afterward, even though the person had done nothing but be present. That's the part that should make you pause. Proximity alone, in the crow's accounting, was enough to open a file on you. No violence required, just bad timing and a body on the ground. None of this happens in isolation either. Crow alarm calls aren't a single all-purpose siren. Researchers, including longtime crow specialist Kevin McGowan at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, have documented that crows vary their calls depending on the type and proximity of a threat. A perched, distant hawk gets a different vocal response than a hawk in active pursuit. The call changes shape and urgency as the situation changes, in something close to real time. It's not one word for danger. It's a small, live-updating vocabulary for describing exactly how worried everyone should be right now. And crows don't limit their intelligence gathering to other crows. They eavesdrop. Blue jays, other corvids, and various songbirds all produce their own alarm calls when they spot a predator, calls meant only for their own species. Crows have been observed responding to these other species' warnings anyway, reacting to danger they never personally detected because another bird, one that wasn't even trying to inform them, gave the game away. It's less a closed communication system than an open one, picking up signal from anything nearby that happens to be broadcasting. Layer all of that together and a picture starts to form that is genuinely difficult to shake once you've seen it. Individual facial recognition that persists for years, social transmission of that recognition to birds who never had the original experience, contextual alarm calls that shift with the level of danger, cross-species eavesdropping that expands the range of what they know, and a documented tendency to treat mere proximity to a dead crow as grounds for suspicion. That's not folklore. That's a decade-plus of peer-reviewed field research, some of it repeated at other universities with the same results. But it isn't all threat assessment and suspicion. The same intelligence that lets crows hold a grudge also seems to let them hold something like gratitude. In Seattle, a girl named Gabby Mann started feeding crows near her home as a child. Over years of consistent, gentle feeding, the crows began doing something nobody asked them to do. They left things for her. Small, shiny objects. Buttons, beads, a piece of metal, bits of broken jewelry. Not scattered randomly around the yard, but placed, repeatedly, in the spot where she left food, seemingly timed to when she'd actually be there to find them. It became enough of a pattern that local media covered it, and Marsleff himself has pointed to it as a plausible example of reciprocal behavior, crows responding to consistent kindness with something that looks, at minimum, like an attempt at exchange. Other, similar reports have surfaced elsewhere. Individuals who fed a local crow family regularly and started finding small objects left in predictable places, an unofficial pattern researchers still don't fully understand mechanically, but one that shows up often enough to not be dismissed as coincidence. Whether it's genuine gift-giving in the way we'd understand it, or simple reinforcement behavior wrapped in something that only looks sentimental to us, is still debated. But the behavior itself, repeated, targeted delivery of objects to specific people who'd been consistently kind, is documented and real. So here's where all of this actually lands, and it's less about crows than it is about us. For most of human history, we treated the birds circling above our streets as background noise, whether with feathers, decoration on a power line. The actual science says something far less comfortable. They have been watching individually, specifically, and for a long time. They can tell you apart from your neighbor. They can decide, based on one bad interaction, that you're a threat worth warning the whole block about, and that warning can outlive your even remembering the interaction happened. They can decide, based on nothing but standing near an unfortunate coincidence, that you're a suspect. And they can, in their own strange way, decide you're someone worth being kind to, and act on that too. None of it required artificial intelligence to discover. It required people willing to put on a rubber mask and get mobbed by birds for over a decade, and other people willing to sit for hours watching what happens around a dead bird, and it required not assuming in advance that the answer would be boring. Every uncomfortable finding in this story came from a human being who was willing to take a wild animal's behavior seriously enough to test it properly, instead of writing it off as instinct and moving on. That's really the uncomfortable part if you want the honest one. It was never really about the crows having a secret. It was about how long we assumed they didn't, simply because it was easier than looking closely enough to find out otherwise. The birds were never hiding anything. We just weren't paying attention. So the next time a crow tilts its head at you a little too long from a fence post, or a group of them goes quiet and still around something on the sidewalk, it's worth remembering what the research actually says. You are not necessarily invisible to it, and you are probably never as invisible as you assumed. Somewhere out there, a crow may already have an opinion about you. And unlike most opinions strangers form about each other, this one might actually be paying attention to the evidence.